Today I'm going to share my process for taking this sketch of a Lamborghini Revuelto and turning it into this sketch. Along the way, I'll share some general tips for drawing cars and some useful functions inside of Procreate. And a feature that is really helpful in Procreate to start is the reference image tab. You can reference your own canvas, or you can reference an image and you can pull an image from your library. First, I'm going to create a skeleton sketch, or an underlay if you will, just to block in the perspectives and proportions and get all the main design lines in there. And then I'll do an overlay and tighten everything up.
The purpose of an underlay sketch isn't to get everything correct on the first shot or to be too precious with the sketch. Here we're using the Procreate pencil brush, so we can keep things light and pretty fluid. So things that we want to get correct in our underlay are things like the wheelbase, the overall width, the silhouette of the vehicle, and then we'll want to be sure that we're capturing some of those core or most iconic details. With the underlay finished, we'll move on to our refinement sketch.
Use your layers, 2 fingers to tap on the active layer, then drag to turn the opacity down. And I'll put this down to about 17%. Now, we can work on a new layer above that. And here, I might actually go with the Derwent brush, or the Derwent pencil, so that I can get a little bit more texture to what I'm doing, it's a bit more bold. You can really punch out some darks, and I might add a little bit of shading to this sketch. So I think that this whole sketch needs to be a little bit wider. Well, this whole section over here needs to be adjusted. So I'm going to lasso tool, going to click my freeform adjustment, and I'm going to just start pulling this out so that I can get a look that feels a bit closer to what I want before I jump into the overlay sketch. And I'm actually going to make this whole thing just a little bit smaller so that we can fit properly on the page. Now this time I'm going to start with my ground line, the bottom of the car. Block that in. This is a little too squished here. All right, so actually we want this whole thing to come up a bit more like this. And give this a little bit more space, and you can cut that up here like that. Now we'll add our front wheel. I think this ellipse wants to be a little bit more open, and we want this rear wheel to be a little bit larger. And since this is a sketch, we can probably, I'll say, cheat things a little bit and make certain things a little beefier. And the nice thing about Procreate is that I can move things around a bit, rotate things around, get this A-pillar right. Generally, you'll find the top of the glass usually isn't right in the middle. Like for instance, it's usually not, you don't have a window that goes like this. It usually has a bit of speed to it, more like that. So we want to be sensitive to that here. And I actually think that this wheel opening is slightly squared off. It's not a perfect circle at the rear wheel on this vehicle. Okay, this kicks out, and then you've got another detail down here. And before I get caught up in all these little details, let's make sure that we got the rest of the car kind of looking right. I will often start in on details and then lose track of what the rest of the cars are doing. So we want to keep our head out of the weeds here and stay on task. Make sure that we get the big things right, like the stance, the proportion, all of that. And there's actually a little bit of a peak here. Then this cuts back. And now we've got a bit more space for that Revuelto badge. And now I'm just working back around the car. Now remember that this line, this form fades out right here. So we'll let that line kind of die off. Let's fade off into the background there, or into the body here. Now, let's get this, let's punch out that body line and then kick this up, kick that up. Yeah, right like there. And then this vent drops down. This is a massive vent. Like you could fit a small human into this vent. This still doesn't feel quite meaty enough. I almost want to drag this whole thing back just a bit. I think it needs a bit more space. that. And there's like a part break here, so it seems, and then this shoots up like so. There we go, it's starting to feel better. And then it comes up and over here, and then cuts back down pretty dramatically. And you've got a little surface here where this buttress blends into. Then you've got a little step out here, a little step out, and then there's another arrow element. There's a lot going on around this rear wheel. Starting to feel like the right car. Let's see, let's flip this whole thing. Let me hide the underlayer. That's starting to feel a bit better, huh? I think things are still a little strange around this section. Let's keep working on that. So one of the benefits of flipping your sketch horizontally is that you can start to see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. It's like seeing your sketch with fresh eyes. I'm just gonna add, while my brain is figuring out how I'm gonna adjust this front, I'm just gonna add a little bit of value through here. And that doesn't look very good, does it? And let's make that a bit more subtle. There we go. That's better. So turning the brush with the Derwent pencil, you can turn your brush, and it has tilt sensitivity, so you can really get some nice, pretty natural pencil looking markings. Kind of block these in just to see if these graphic shapes look right. I mean, they look pretty good. One issue with this image is that it becomes a little bit hard to see exactly what's going on in some of these areas. So we're gonna have to make some guesses. So you've got your A pillar that comes down here like this. You've got an additional form, and then this section over here. This might be a little too accentuated at the moment. And so let's knock this back just a bit. Okay, and then this light maybe doesn't shoot out quite as much as I've got it shooting out here. It probably is a bit more like so. So let's erase a little bit of that out. And then I think this shape wants to be refined a bit, a little bit. So then you've got a shape that cuts back here and here. So now I've got a little bit of representation there. So that's starting to come together. Now I just need to adjust this section here. You have freeform, uniform, distort, and warp as different ways to modify a shape that you're working on in Procreate. Distort allows you to have control over, all 4 points. Uniform, everything is uniform. And then freeform, you can kind of just, this is like a non-proportional scale, versus distort, which actually allows you to modify the angles of things. And warp is just a whole slew of tools that allows you to really get crazy. We don't want to warp though. And there's really like a 2-part surface here. There's the front surface, and this cuts down the side a bit more like so. And then there's something going on that again we can't quite see. So we're just going to cast this in shadow. Now we'll put those wheels in. So you've got your center, and the wheels are pretty interesting. So now we'll go and use our perfect ellipse tool. So you draw an ellipse and you just hold it, and it will make your ellipse perfect. And we'll draw another one just for that wheel. Okay, now we're gonna do a new layer. And the 5-spoke splits into 2, which is pretty cool. Hint at what's going on here. We're not going to get too crazy about all the detail because I actually can't see it in the photo. But we know we've got a nice little 5-spoke going. And then I'll come in and I'll just add some value here just to highlight a little bit of the spokes themselves. And then generally, spokes on the top are going to be a little bit more in shadow. So I'll hit these with a little bit extra value. Again, this is a sketch, not a finished rendering, so we don't have to get too precious. Now let's make sure we get that placed right. And do another one to get the meat of the tire. Yeah, it's pretty good. Now that we know more of what the shape is, we can probably move a little more accurately and quicker on this rear wheel. It's almost like a serpent's tongue. Now these rims split at the end. And then you're not really, if we have these wheels set back as much as I've got them set back here, you're not going to see a whole lot of these two, the two closest spokes. So we'll blast in a little bit of value, and again we'll make the rear, the tops a little bit darker. And we'll add a little bit more value here for the tire, a little bit more value at the bottom of the tire as the wheel rolls under, the actual tire itself rather, excuse me. Now let's get a little bit of a drop shadow. This has a pretty dramatic lighting setup. So we're gonna have this big cast shadow kind of going way off into the distance, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna use the edge of the pen, the edge of the apple brush, and I'm gonna get a little bit softer shadow here. Let's add a little bit more on a new layer, a little bit more value, a little bit more shading, but we're gonna use a slightly lighter color. That way it doesn't overpower. So we've got that. Show this line break here. This is definitely a little bit darker over here. Body side will want to be in shadow. This muscle here will want a little bit of a shadow. And I'm going to come back and basically turn the opacity down on this whole layer. We're just going to punch up the darks in the glass and really have this sketch reading nice and punchy. Again, still using that Derwent brush, this side window. I didn't include the side view mirrors, kind of left that detail out, not necessarily by choice, I just moved past it and now I'm just noticing it now. So we could add that if we'd like. Hit some of these wheel details as well a bit more so we can get that a strong initial graphic read on these wheels. And the wheels are super important on any vehicle, right? It really sets a vehicle off or doesn't set it off and it makes it look worse. So it's really important to get the wheels right, or at least give them some attention, right? They're worth a little bit of love. That starts to feel pretty good. Still some things we could sit around and tweak for sure. Let me come back and let's come back in here and just make sure that this is reading a little bit better, because these kind of arrow, this three-pronged light is a pretty important detail. It's the signature of the car, so we want to make sure that that's reading well. And that reads a little bit better. Let's get this mirror in here. It's a pretty cool mirror, so we might as well get it in here. Just gonna draw this pretty dark in here, and then I'll erase out a bit. Come back in with a light eraser, or come back in with an eraser. When I'm looking at this now, I think that this buttress actually needs to come up quite a bit higher. Like, it actually needs to come up like here. And then this whole thing is actually in shadow. And here we are with the sketch. I'll just drop a little box behind this to kind of set it off on the background. I can continue to noodle around a bit and just kind of tweak things and jostle with some things. But overall, I think I like how it came out, just as an exploratory sketch. I hope you learned something in this video, and if you have any questions, please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of this sketch and what else you'd like to see from me, and I'm happy to oblige. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you're well. Talk to you later.